Once upon a time, there was a young man named Mike, an experienced hiker who loved exploring nature, often ventured alone into the woods. One weekend, he decided to challenge himself by hiking into a remote, uncharted forest. Equipped with his gear and confidence, he set off, eager for the adventure. The first few days of his hike were peaceful and rewarding. Mike marveled at the towering trees, the vibrant flora, and the sounds of nature surrounding him. However, on the third day, the forest began to change. The familiar paths faded and the dense trees started to look the same. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that he had lost his way. Mike tried to retrace his steps, but every turn seemed to lead him further into the wilderness. He checked his map and compass repeatedly, but they only added to his confusion. The sun was beginning to set, and the forest grew darker and more ominous. Fear began to creep into his heart as he realized he was truly lost. Just when his hope was waning, Mike spotted a small cabin nestled between the trees. Relief washed over him as he hurried toward it. "Thank you, God," he whispered, overwhelmed with gratitude. "I have found my way back." He eagerly entered the cabin, hoping to find someone who could help him. But inside, the cabin was empty. It was clear that the place had been abandoned for a long time. The furniture was old and covered in dust, and the fireplace had long since gone cold. Mike's heart sank with disappointment. The cabin, which had seemed like a beacon of hope, now felt like another dead end. Sadness and frustration welled up inside him. He had been so sure that God had guided him to safety, but now he felt utterly alone again. In his despair, Mike knelt down and prayed, "God, I don't know why this is happening, but I trust you. Please show me the way back. I know you have a plan, even if I don't understand it." As night fell, Mike made the decision to stay in the cabin. It was a small comfort, but it provided shelter from the wild animals outside. He felt safe inside its walls, and in the days that followed, the cabin became his temporary home. He found peace and security in its quiet solitude, convincing himself that he would find a way out soon. Several days later, Mike was sitting outside the cabin. He had built a small fire to keep warm and cook his meals. As the sun rose higher in the sky, he decided to go hunting for food, so he carefully extinguished the fire before heading out. Hours later, as he made his way back to the cabin, Mike noticed something that filled him with dread. Thick smoke was rising from the direction of the cabin. Panic surged through him, and he sprinted toward the cabin, fearing the worst. When he arrived, his fears were confirmed. The cabin was engulfed in flames, the fire devouring the wooden structure. Desperately, Mike tried to put out the fire, throwing dirt and sand onto the flames, but his efforts were in vain. After what felt like an eternity, the fire finally died down, leaving nothing but ashes and charred remains. Mike collapsed to the ground, overwhelmed by shock and despair. His last hope, the small cabin that had been his sanctuary, was gone. Tears streamed down his face as he cried out to God, "I trusted you. I believed you would help me find my way back. But now, even this small cabin is gone. You've taken away my only hope. Why, God? Why have you abandoned me?" Mike sat there for hours, lost in his grief. Feeling utterly defeated, he couldn't understand why this was happening. He had prayed, he had trusted, and yet everything seemed to be falling apart. As he sat in the ashes of his despair, a faint sound reached his ears, a distant, rhythmic chopping noise. It grew louder, and Mike realized it was the sound of a helicopter approaching. He quickly climbed a nearby hill, waving his arms frantically to signal the aircraft. To his amazement, the helicopter circled above him and began to descend. When it landed, a rescue team emerged, and one of the men explained, "We saw the smoke from your cabin while flying a reconnaissance mission. We sent the helicopter to check it out, thinking there might be a fire that needed extinguishing." Mike stood there, stunned by the realization. The fire that had destroyed the cabin, which he had seen as the final blow to his hope, had been the very thing that saved him. Without it, the rescue team would never have found him in the vast forest. In that moment, Mike understood. God hadn't abandoned him. The fire, though devastating, was part of a greater plan. It was the signal that led to his rescue, the event that brought him out of the forest. Mike felt a deep sense of humility and gratitude wash over him as he realized the truth. Even when he thought all hope was lost, God was still guiding him, still watching over him. As the helicopter lifted him out of the forest and toward safety, he understood that God's plan is bigger than his plan for himself. Silently thanked God for the plan that he could not see, but now fully trusted. He learned that sometimes what seems like a disaster is actually a blessing in disguise. In life, we often plan things, but outcomes don't always match our desires. We try to understand events with our limited perspective, and when faced with trouble, our faith and patience may falter. Instead of complaining, we should maintain our trust in God. With over 8 billion people in the world, God has a unique plan for each of us. Our efforts, combined with God's blessings, can help us overcome any challenge. So when things aren't going as planned, remember that God's plan is always greater and better than our own. Thanks for watching. God bless you.